Before I start, I would like also to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we're presently sitting here on the Vindal and Wilgara people's lands. Pay respect to elders past, present and emerging, and also pay respect to any Indigenous Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people on this presentation today. And it really is quite an honour, but also a great opportunity to be here with you. Thanks, Susan. Yep, we're rocking and rolling now. And I'll start with that first slide. It was a deliberate thing to think about. You know, that quote says that you don't actually, you know, I didn't sort of get born as a leader. And why I, you know, there's something I wanted and still want to do to still make a difference. And that has often then put me into leadership roles. And so I think that's important to think about, that staying on this and true to what that difference or those differences are that you want to make throughout your journey is a really important thing, whatever roles you end up taking. So thanks, Susan. On the next slide, I haven't been in every, there are still a lot of countries I wish to visit. So the next slide's got a map. But what I did is just color coded it to show you, and it's not, oh, there we are. So where it's green is where I've actually lived long term. So I'll test your geographies there. And of course you can see Townsville there. And I left Canberra off, so that must just be a Freudian slip. Sorry, Canberrans. You know, the places in blue are where I've regularly worked, so long-term relationships with those countries. And then the purples are where I've spent a lot of time as well, and that circle shows where I'm working now a lot in the Greater Mekong. So I'll let you look at your geography lesson later. Doing this presentation has been really useful, and again, a great skill as a leader is to try to, I was asked to sort of reflect upon how I've developed whatever skills I think I'm using as a leader, and that reflexivity is really important as a leadership skill. And this has given me another opportunity to try to think about that and, you know, again, take stock. So what I'm going to do is just take you, not necessarily chronologically, but take you through some of the incidences or places or people I've met who I believe influence some of the things that I do in the way that I manage, that I communicate, that I interact with people and sometimes lead. So the first one is don't assume or judge people's commitment to work. And there's a couple of stories there. But first, you know, it's too easy to label people as lazy or not committed or not really taking things seriously. A couple of stories here. That top slide there isn't exactly where a person I worked with lived, but something similar in Zambia. We were doing work with Finnish aid. I was living in Zambia around family planning. The nurse researcher who worked with us from university teaching hospital, the consultant that came from Finland was sort of saying, well, why is she not doing any work at night? Why is she coming the next day and she hasn't sort of worked on anything? So I took her to where she lived, which is fairly similar to this. A one-roomed place, bathroom, washroom out the back, shared. She had one light in the whole facility, and in there was everything. Her bed didn't have a table, so she had to work on it, didn't have regular electricity, etc. How could she work at night? How could she do homework? So you know, that sort of really contrasted it. And the second was the bottom one. Again, when I worked in Papua New Guinea, people often, you know, other managers, particularly expatriate managers, were worried, well, why are people often either late to work, they're not showing good attention to work, or why do they leave early? And again, just a couple of, you know, reasons for that. One of them is people who live in these sorts of settlements, and these are very common. This is often where some of your counterparts in the Department of Health, even at more senior levels, were living in these sorts of settlements. They don't have their own wash facilities, so they wake up 4 o'clock or whatever in the morning to go to try to wash, to then come to work. They then have to catch a public vehicle, a PMV, and again, they don't have regular routes or anything. You don't know that you can go somewhere at a certain time and the bus will be there and take you somewhere. So they're spending a lot of time, hours, just to get to work. And so it's not necessarily their fault that they're not there on time. These are the conditions in which they live. And the second one, why they leave early, is many of these people go to pick their children up from school, particularly their daughters, because they can't leave their daughters alone at home, even sometimes with other male relatives, because they are worried about what will happen to their daughters. They're the realities that were causing people to have the behaviours that people were seeing. And I think that's really important for us to think about, even in the settings we're working in now, that don't jump to judgments, sit and talk to people, sit and try to together negotiate how you can find some more flexibility that works with people and their really lived experiences and lives. The next, so that's my first little thing that I carry with me. The next one is management's not acultural. And the gentleman in the middle, Jay Satir, is a professor of management from India, was head of the executive director of the International Council for the Management of Population Programs based out of Malaysia. And we've been doing a lot of work together for a long time about scaling up quality of care in family planning and reproductive health services. He said this to me, he said, management is not acultural. Often when you read management texts, particularly in countries like ours, it comes across as though there's these truths and this is how you should manage and that will always work. And he said, well, it's not, the context matters. There's no one right way to manage, and you must take into account cultural perspectives. And I think that's, they were really important things that I carried with me. The other interesting point he raised, and I'll bring it up later, is, always, if you're a person who is busy and manages via a diary, put in your diary breaks and holidays so that you give them as much emphasis as all those other meetings and activities that you do. So manage your time as well. But this issue about management's not acultural, again, let's talk about that. In Papua New Guinea, often we were finding that public health advisors weren't seeming to manage staff below them, even drivers, etc. And then when you dig deeper, you find, well, that driver is actually a chief of that person's language group or tribe. And so there is no way that provincial health advisor, just because he's got a higher delegation in the government service, traditionally, culturally, he isn't. The driver actually was of a higher ranking because he was the chief. And the other thing we often found in trying to get decisions to be made, it was often difficult for individuals to make decisions. It was better to have committees making some decisions, because then you can overcome some of those difficulties people may have around ranks in their own traditional setting. So again, thinking about if decisions aren't being made, try to understand why. It's not usually, it doesn't mean that they're just not wanting to or they're lazy. There may be reasons why people aren't making decisions at that point in time. The next slide, something again I take with me is it definitely does take a team. You might be a leader in the position you're in now or what you're aspiring to, but the only way you can be a leader is to have all of these other types of roles and responsibilities managed by others in your team. Often private sector do these sorts of things. This is a team management system. So I've had this, I've been through this quite a few times because I've worked a lot in the private sector. And it really stresses as a team trying to understand how you need that balance and you need to grow, and also as individuals, you may need to grow some of the areas that aren't your natural area of fit when you do this. It doesn't mean you're stuck in the explorer, promoter or creator, innovator all the time, although that's where a lot of academics really do sit. But you may need to, because of the roles you play, you may need to start building some of those other skills that are there, but you really need to have a team, and you really need to appreciate that a leader is only where they are because of the team that they're supporting and working with behind them. And that's something that my partner says often. He's a manager, he was a management and administration person. And he often says, you usually don't even know what's happening behind the scenes with management and administration if they're doing their job right. And so remember also to thank them, to include them in those discussions and to highlight the roles they're playing, because usually they are the silent achievers in the work that you're doing in your organisation. The next thing that the next slide talks about, have a good heart, which sounds an interesting saying. It's something that people in the Pacific and Papua New Guinea often say. They often will forgive you some mistakes, indiscretions, trip-ups that you do. And this is the same as a manager. If people believe that the reason you're doing things is always still for the right reason, that you really do care, are committed to what it is that you're trying to do, you have a good heart, and there they will work with you to try to help you understand how to do it better next time, what you might have done wrong this time, try to help you and even mentor you to work through those situations. And I think that's really important as a leader, that you need to find ways to support, encourage, mentor people. It's very hard though to build those basic instincts. So they're hard to grow. So trying to make sure that you have good teams that share that vision and working in the right direction with you, then you can grow a lot of those other skills and capacities around you. The next slide is talking about something I learned as I was doing my PhD in medical anthropology, was around different rationalities. And one of the things medical anthro, one of the messages I took home, it taught me a lot more, but the one I keep remembering is that most people, most of the time, act rationally. So just because it isn't the thing you thought that they should be doing or how they should be responding, they often are responding in a rational way for them, in their context, their experiences, their history, etc. And so you need to understand why they're doing what they're doing and why they're doing it there, what's their rationality for doing it, and then work with them to say, well, we actually might need these outcomes now, so how can we do that together? The reason I've got this picture of, this was my PhD, was in rural Vietnam, looking at reproductive tract infections. And again, trying to understand health-seeking behaviours of women like these two women here, who I got quite close to during my PhD over several years of fieldwork. And why they do things was always rational, and it might change from time to time, but it was a rational reason for them weighing up all the other circumstances and experiences that they'd had. It may not have been what the health authorities wanted them to do, but you could then work with them to try to help them find ways that they could manage more appropriately to protect their health, but taking into account their circumstances. And I think that's really important as a leader, is to realise the majority of the time, the people you're working with, there is a rational reason for why they're doing what they're doing. And so understand that. It may not be the same as yours. The next slide talks about communication is key. And again, particularly, working across multiple cultures, this is really important. And often people say, how do you work between various cultures? Don't you trip yourself up? How do you make sure? A lot of people get anxious about this. And the thing I have found and still find is, if you just approach everybody respectfully in the first case, don't assume that you have any more privilege than anyone else, that you're of any other rank or anything. If you just have respectful communication in the first place, again, a bit like that, you've got a good heart, they will then guide you. At least you start the conversations, and they will then help you understand the right cultural ways of dealing with things and in different types of settings and circumstances. So, and also don't assume that your voice matters more than any others. So I've shown you, again, two more pictures from Vietnam, One's a group of researchers that I was working with in an academy there. The second is the Vietnam Women's Union, where we were also doing some training. And again, you know, many of these people are very highly ranked in the Vietnamese, or were in the Vietnamese army, had done a lot in their lifetimes to help Vietnam develop. And you know, you need to be respectful and understand how to work with them, but also you're not censoring yourself, but you're being sensitive to the circumstances that you're working in, so that you can not put them offside or embarrass or stigmatize them, but actually find a way to work with them for that common vision. All of us in these two photos were looking around women's reproductive health in Vietnam and trying to find ways to do that well. We shared that vision. We may have come from different backgrounds, cultures, even political leanings, but you've got that same aim, so find a way to communicate. And I think that's really important. And in doing that, then you get that common, that creative commons, you get a lot more good ideas. You actually end up with a far better product than you may have thought you were bringing as the leader or the expert. And the last point just on this is also, you know, not all people think in the same way. One of the things often I've learned in meetings and you know, we often expect people to give you answers straight away. You're brainstorming. And some of us do that very well. Some of us think as we talk. That's actually what stimulates that part of our brain. Others actually want to go away, think about it, read the information, then come back and give you their points of view. And particularly in the work I do with civil society organisations, often I'm working with the people who are representing others and expecting them, you know, they're there because they're representing people. But if you also don't give them time to go back, talk to the people they're representing so that they really bring those people's views, not their own personal view, you're not actually really valuing what their roles are. So again, when you're doing meetings, when you're trying to get decisions made, when you're trying to work with people in your team, think about the different ways people think and allow different ways for people to communicate, give people time. Don't expect answers straight away, because you're actually potentially losing some really valuable inputs and ideas that will help the product or help whatever you're doing be far stronger than what you get from just those first impressions that come from the people who are comfortable working in that sort of way. The next thing I've used,
April's.
Sorry, there's a couple of people who aren't on mute.
Is it? Okay. Might send that down to Monica in Melbourne. I was talking to Chris yesterday. She was going to get in touch with you. So I don't know if you want to.
Sorry, Jodie, we can hear everything you're saying.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. The other thing as a leader is sometimes you're just a little bit pushy. But anyway, the next thing is transparency and accountability. And I think it's really important for a leader to try as much as they can to ensure that what you do, what you decide, that you're doing in a transparent way for the people with whom you're working, leading, representing. You may sometimes, there may be things that are confidential that you can't tell them about, but usually there's a lot that you can do to bring them on that journey, to make it clear why some of the decisions are being made. And it may not end up being what everybody wanted the solution to be, but if they've understood why that solution is, or why that decision has been developed, then that actually helps. And if you do that consistently, that means people understand that you're not really trying to hide things. It's a good way usually to try to knock rumours, etc., on the head. And if you're guided by policies, not a slave to policies, but guided by policies, then people also know that that's what your touchstone is, that you're making decisions guided by policies that everybody knows about, and that's what you're trying to use to help get the decision that needs to be made. I also think it's really important to I'm very supportive of 360 performance reviews. Again, private sector uses that a lot more. We don't often use it in academic lives, But I think having all of the people really being accountable to all who are affected by your leadership is a really important thing to have, and I would really encourage it. The reason I've got this group of Papua New Guinean community health workers here is one of the things that really brought this home to me was early on in the 2000s when I went back up to Papua New Guinea to live for quite a while. I had to attend in the Eastern Highlands province a graduation of community health workers. And we were all sitting on the stage, the whole of the village that were in the catchment of where these community health workers were going to work were there. And what their graduation included telling everybody in the village what these people have been trained to do, what they can't do, what's in their kit, how they get resupplied, who to talk if you're not happy with the services they're providing, who do they report to, what can you do? They made it all very transparent about what these people are, and that accountability was really important to allow those workers and that community to actually get services that they require, and for the workers to be able to be accepted and have that trust and acceptability by the community to do that work. And it was a really, really powerful moment for me to actually understand why that was being done. Just as a sidebar, straight after that, the back of the stage, because it had only been constructed that morning on bamboo poles, the back of the stage fell away. I was sitting not at the back. I had to grab the head of the Australian Aid Program from forward to stop him falling backwards. So, you can also have some really fun times in some of these settings in which I've worked. The next one's probably no surprise to any of you, is those people who provide mentoring and support to you along your life journey. And I've been very fortunate at different times in my life and different parts of either my technical skills, my cultural areas, my self-development, or my negotiation skills around my jobs. I've had a lot of people who've helped me along that journey. And often those mentors weren't explicitly labelled mentors. I know nowadays, and I think it's good, I'm often part of mentoring programs. I think it's important, that reciprocity, to give back to people or organisations who have also given to you in your life journey in developing as a leader. Just a couple of the people who you see there. Maxine Whittaker, who's the woman in the black and white. She was one of my first, when I started my career as a public health, after I finished my Masters of Public Health. She was my supervisor for the work I was doing in Zambia. She was in New York. I went off to Zambia, nobody else there. I was a one-person team office at the age of 26, 27. But what she really taught me a lot of skills, particularly in negotiation. So I applied for a job because of the man you see next to her. That's Richard Cash, who was one of the people who discovered oral rehydration therapy in Bangladesh many years ago as a very young medical student, a graduate. He said he saw this job advertised for the Population Council based in Zambia and Zimbabwe. I had never been to Africa. I'd had some African pen pals, but that's a different story. Most of my work had been in Asia, and that's where I was expecting my public health career after my Masters to take me. But Richard Cash had belief in me, and he said, Maxine, you should go for that job. And I said, but I don't know anything about this, and family planning wasn't what I thought I was going to do. But he said, go for the job. It was advertised as an associate level. So I did a lot of homework, read everything I could find about Zambia, Zimbabwe, family planning there, culture, etc. So I arrived down to New York for the interviews, and I was successful after a couple of days of interviews. Francine was, they then offered me the job, and they offered me the job at a lower level. And Francine said to me, but Maxine, they accepted you for the job as associate, not as that lower level job. Just because you haven't got some of the things, they actually offered you and interviewed you for that job. You have to fight. Don't let the women in this organisation down by you taking a lower position. And so together we did have that fight. She taught me a lot more than that. But that's, that was also an important thing, just, a country girl from Australia working over in New York City, didn't feel I even didn't know how I was going to get down to the interviews. I was trying to find somebody, I was a grad student without very much money. I had enough money to live and then fly back to Australia to start earning money again. And I said to them, I'm trying to find somebody I could grab a ride with from Boston down to New York. Boston's where I was living. And they said, no, we're going to fly you, Maxine. I went, oh my goodness, they're going to fly me. that was a bit surprising to me. So that was my beginning of my corporate life. Richard, I've told you about the man in the sepia photo. That's Mr. Shepherd, who has passed away. He was my maths teacher, but he was a lot more than that. He actually believed in me and really helped develop that self-confidence in myself. I'd moved a lot in schools. My dad was a TAFE teacher. And so I often had a different school every couple of years up the southeast corner coasts. And so I wasn't really that sure of where I was educationally, because I was in the Catholic school system and they didn't use those, you transfer those in those days over to the public system, which I started in Bundaberg. He was at Bundaberg State High. So I was put in grade 8K, which was that was the lowest of the language speaking courses. So you could do French A to C were the French ones, and A was where the smartest of the kids went. So D to K were the German speaking, because I wanted to learn German. One of the reasons was to stop me the nuns wanted me to go to their high school and I didn't want to stay in the Catholic education system. So I said, no, I want to learn German, because they did teach German. But they didn't know where I sat academically. And so I felt, I wasn't sure how smart or not I was. Mr. Shepherd helped me and mentored me the whole way through, and actually opened up opportunities for me to do a lot of things that built some of the skills I now do have in public speaking, in advocacy, in representing people. They all started in high school, but often a very good teacher can be the person who does that for you. The man below him, Mike Koenig, with the maroon tie, he was my boss in Bangladesh and really helped me understand how to do really good quality field research. So after Zambia, I went to Bangladesh, and that was my next site. And although I'd been involved in research in Zambia, it was really in Bangladesh where I learned how to do good field research, both qualitative and quantitative research, how to do operational research, and therefore also how to package those things up into policy briefs and into what we now call business cases to present to donors, so that the research we did to improve access and quality of family planning and reproductive health services to rural Bangladeshi women actually got onto the agenda of the donors and got funded. So I learned a lot of technical skills from Michael, but also how to be a gentle, inclusive, very supportive leader in the organisation. The woman with the most colour on that screen, Jane Thomason, some of you might know her. She's someone I've known for a long time as a colleague, as a PhD student, not of mine, but then also she ended up, as often as happens in my life, people who were my students often end up being hire me for something later on and become my bosses, which is a lovely thing to happen. Jane is an entrepreneur now. She started a private sector consulting company back in the late 1990s, when a lot of the consulting companies for DFAT, which was then AusAid, were very much just these big corporate consulting companies with no real health expertise, and also seemed to be only interested really, didn't bring some of the nuance that Jane and I believe should be in development. So she started the company. She had some of the funding to do it, but she and my husband then joined her in the Papua New Guinea project. The first time I went back to Papua New Guinea was with her. But she taught me a lot about entrepreneurship, about taking risks, about you know, and she's still a very creative person. So always just thinking outside the box, bringing people who think outside the box in with you, you know, going down some risks that mightn't take, but, you know, actually there's other things you learn on that journey. And so she still does inspire me around the risks and things that she takes. And she's a very, very successful woman, and her 2 children are also in the entrepreneur startup space as well, have inherited that vibe. The Bergerons, Gretchen and Warren Bergeron, have both passed away now. They were with Richard, some of my teachers at Harvard when I was doing my Masters of Public Health. And they were people who were devoted long-term to Haiti. They worked at Save the Children Fund USA as well. They took me in over the summer break when I was over there, not for money, but actually into the organisation, and helped me, got me to start to feel confident about the application of what my book learning was into actually real life activities for Haiti. But they also showed me the importance of having long-term relationships with organisations, with people, with countries, to be able to get some of those things I've been talking about earlier, that richness of understanding, that appreciation of different rationalities, excuse me, that appreciation of things needing to take time and to find a way to mould into what is going to be able to be sustained in the settings in which you're working. Wonderful, wonderful people, and others during that Masters of Public Health was a really pivotal moment for me. And I think we should think about that when we have our own students also working with us at master's level. Not, you know, a lot of them are people who are trying to think about, find their space, and maybe find different spaces, which I definitely was trying at that stage. And the people they meet and the experience they have there can be life-changing. Sandra Kabir, so the woman next to her, was the founder of the Bangladeshi Women's Health Coalition. And Sandra is a wonderful, she ended up migrating to the UK, but spent most of her time in Bangladesh. And again, she was an advocate. What she wanted was rights for women over their health, their bodies, etc. And that was the name of the organisation. And she fought against a lot of resistance. She'd been doing that for years and years. She herself had been a rural village girl who had been married off to a recently widowed school teacher, 2 to 3 times her age. And she ran away and ran to Dhaka, and got a job as a receptionist, and then slowly built up some skills in typing, and obviously has had an innate intelligence, but had a real drive and a vision of trying to make a difference. And so then just slowly built up this huge movement, became a global advocate around women's reproductive health, as well as a big game changer in Bangladesh. When she moved to England, she worked in the hamlets in London, where there's a lot of Bangladeshi migrants often, and particularly again, often some of the old cultural beliefs and practices are carried with them to those hamlets. So again, some of the conditions she'd been working to change in Bangladesh for women, she found again in the hamlets in Bangladesh. But again, just that following that passion, and you know, no matter what happens, leading through it, but learning as you go as well, is something Sandra helped me understand. And then the last isn't actually a picture of Grace Chiura, but Grace was a woman I worked with in that first job with Francine in Zimbabwe. I lived in Zambia, but spent half my time also in Zimbabwe. And we were doing an integrated family planning, adult literacy, and women's income generation work north of Harare. And again, Grace had actually been a freedom fighter, had been exiled when it was Rhodesia, from Rhodesia, worked in the UK for ZANU-PF. It hurt her dreadfully to start to then see how Mugabe, who had been a hero, ended up turning out, and how all that happened. But and there's books recently about the women who fought for, independence in Africa, and also those disappointments, because often, unfortunately, some of those leaders dreadfully let them down. But Grace really taught me a lot also about working in communities, understanding how to pick up cultural practices, sitting and listening, and also similar to communication styles in a lot of the Pacific, also just accepting silences. That's something people of often Western Anglo-Saxon background hate, those silent moments. We actually find them uncomfortable and often just start to speak. But in many cultures, those silences are actually also telling you something. Those silences are a communication technique. And similarly, prayer, no matter what religion you might be, but if you can understand in Papua New Guinea and Zimbabwe, Zambia, you often started firstly with the national anthem, but then also with prayer. If you listen to the prayer, often there's messages to people there. And I can remember, a big donor group that had come into Papua New Guinea, and the person who got up to pray was saying things like, dear God, we hope that, you will strengthen the wisdom, understanding and listening skills of all who have come to work with us. So they're actually giving messages as well as, asking God to help guide them and themselves. So silences, prayers, some of those other things that you might think, oh, what a waste of time. I've only got an hour or two for this activity. They actually are really important. And similarly, even in our own settings, don't butt in. If there's a bit of silence, wait, don't be uncomfortable about it. It may be that somebody's finding time to talk. They might agree with you. So learning how to deal with those different moments and cultures is very important. The next slide I've labelled just, that also as a leader, it's important for you to remember you're only human, but for people also to see that you are human. You also hurt from time to time. You're also often tired. Things are happening in your life as well as in theirs. And so you need to make sure that they see that you realise, you have that self-reflection that if you're tired, that maybe that's not when you have some of those difficult meetings. That's that's often where some of those lovely layers of refinement that we build up over time sort of crumble away. They need to see, though, that they might know that problems are happening at home because you don't bring that to work. You try to find ways to manage those things. It is important, and more literature is saying that leaders should let people know also that they've got family, kids, dogs. I mean, people are saying it's been wonderful during Zoom that people have actually seen more, that their leaders have become more human because they've actually seen more into some of their space or their children or their animals. And that really is a very powerful, most management literature is saying that's a really powerful thing for people to realise that you are human. And you also need to show that a rounded life is really important, and that, and mea culpa, this is where I often struggled, particularly when the work you do is also a love, that you often push yourself too much. And that's where Jay Satya, diarise, put in your diary some of those things to make them just as important as other things. And I'm still working on that one, getting there, and part of the decision to sort of step down is part of also supporting that. But it's also, the other thing is you do make mistakes, and that's fine. Leaders aren't infallible, you are only human. But you need to learn from your mistakes. You need to own your mistakes. You don't say, well, that's because so-and-so didn't support me. That's because those people let me down. You have to own the mistakes that you make and show people that you've learned from them. Say sorry. One of the things as a medical doctor, you're told by your litigation people that saying sorry often stops a lot of medical litigation. And that's the same as a leader, saying sorry, I made a mistake that time, sorry, I didn't realise that that's what you were asking for. Whatever the sorry is, saying sorry is a really important thing because it really helps people understand that, you know, that wasn't intentional, it wasn't malevolent. You're human, and it's important to be human. And the reason I've got the picture here of me in Bangladesh with some rural women and children is, you know, it's also important for you to shed tears if you have to. You know, one of the things I still remember in Bangladesh was going to a hospital, and here was a woman bleeding from everywhere because she had disseminated intravascular coagulation because she had a stillbirth that had not been delivered, and her body was now basically, she was bleeding from everywhere to death because she was losing her coagulation factors, and there was nothing that could be done. And the family didn't want to take her home because she'd born a female child and they wanted a male, but also she was expendable from that family's point of view. And I just had to cry. And that's important to do. It's important to show that you have heart. Sorry, it still affects me. The next thing, or the next one, before I become a blubbering mess, is to know your staff. Thanks. I've just got some tissues given to me. Is to know your staff. So this man here, Marcel Tanner, really impressed me on one of my trips. I do a lot of work now with the Swiss Tropical Public Health Institute, which is the building there. But one of the first times I went there, he took me, it doesn't look like a big building, but there's a whole lot of buildings behind it, and there's basements, and so there's labs. It's a very large public health institute and global health institute. And he took me around, and he could go every door of that building, every lab, and knew the name of everybody there, knew what the work was they were doing, where it was heading, but also could introduce, oh, well, he also plays tennis, Maxine, maybe you should meet him. She's also interested in this. You know, she's been to Australia. So he knew his staff, he knew something about everyone, even though he had 600 people in that complex, he could tell me something about everybody he met. And that's really important. You should know the people you work with, all of them, all of the team that helps you do the work. One of the things I've tried to do is every person, new staff who joins my college, independent of what level, whether they're full-time, part-time, whether they're working with the animals out the back, whether they're new reception staff, whether they're the new professor of bioinformatics. I meet all of them, make sure, see how their orientation's going, how they're settling into things, understand what in their lives might be important. Oh, you like classical music, you know, here's the place to go, etc. But also understand what's their ambition. Where do they want this position? Where do they want what they're doing to take them? So that if I hear opportunities, I say to them, if I hear opportunities, if I can see someone they might need to meet with, some opportunity for them to actually move in that direction, then I can look for that for them. And so understanding all of those aspects of them actually helps you have a far, you know, I find it a better environment in which to work, but also you have a very functional performing team, and they know that you have their back and that you are interested in all of them as people. And that's a really important thing as a leader. Nearly near the end. So I started talking about comfortable working environments, and I think the next slide also shows you that. And it's a picture of some of the people I worked with at University of Queensland before I moved up here 6 years ago to James Cook University. People like to work in comfortable environments. That's a physical environment, that's the atmosphere, that's that caring environment that they might feel. And even though these people weren't in Northern Queensland, they still wore tropical shirts some days. So, you know, people often, I like to have an environment that I'm comfortable working in as well, and that people feel comfortable working in. And so trying to bring some of my own, not that it's very expensive artwork, but bring some of my own artwork, my artifacts. If we've got international staff and students and I've actually got something from there, have that somewhere in my office or around the office spaces. Those little touches, I cut flowers from my garden or from the university's gardens, sorry, Hillary, and have a floral display, a fresh floral display every week. Have something also show again that I'm human, have pictures of my family on the desk so that people do feel comfortable. And one of the things that somebody said to me at UQ was, you know, I just feel like I'm almost walking into my second home when I come to work. And I think that's really important. Thinking about all aspects of what helps your team, your people to be productive, feel supported, feel cared for is really important to be a good leader. The last one is just about taking time to engage with people. Taking time to engage with people sort of follows on from a couple of the other things I've talked about. It helps break down barriers. Taking time, realizing that just sitting, listening to people, not just talk about things that are the job, but talk about other things, feeling, you know, having people feel very comfortable that they can come to you if they want to talk about something, if there are some problems, that they know that you will listen, I think is a really important thing. But that takes time, and it's a really important thing to put into your diaries, into your programs. That open door policy should be something you try to do as much as possible, so that people do feel comfortable to come and talk to you around things. A couple of things that have, you know, helped me think about that. These ladies here are women outside a commune health station in one of the Red River provinces in Vietnam. They were women who I met. I had two different roles. I was doing my PhD, and these women were part of that community. But also, I was doing some work with that women's union and with World Health Organization to try to look at improving quality of care for reproductive services and rolling out some new contraceptive methods, so women actually had choices of methods, not just an intrauterine device. So, you know, to get these women's trust to listen, or for me to sit and observe often on consultations, you'd often sit down on the floor and shell nuts with them, you know, shell peanuts, help clean the rice, share a meal of boiled cabbage, because it was a poor province. But doing those things, again, showing you're human, showing you're caring, showing that you do actually want to understand how they live, how it affects what they do. And I think that's the same thing for your staff. It is important to have those times. It's a shame that tea rooms often disappear. It's a shame that, you know, often, you know, it used to be, I remember when I first started universities, that 1 hour lunchtime, nothing was timetabled in it. Nothing as far as teaching or labs. And people actually spent some time, but there's no reason why we can't create some of that space as well ourselves. And there are leaders across the university who do that. That's really important. And it's, you know, also you need to have that belief in working with civil society organisations. It is really important to build that trusting relationship. I've taken on this role as representing them on the Global Fund Regional Steering Committee. They voted for me, so I actually had to present. There were 6 of us in front of CSOs, civil society groups, and they chose me because they also wanted someone who was independent from the government politics of the Greater Mekong countries. But I don't know all of them. I'm having to try to build those relationships up virtually, online, and that is a challenge. But again, it is important to do. You don't let those barriers be barriers. You try to find ways around them. And all of this is being humble, remembering that everyone sitting there has got something to learn from each other for mutual benefit. It's really two-way learning to be able to make the differences that you need to make. So summing up, and then there'll be times for questions and interrogation and comments or sharing. You know, part of, I think, you know, I've got that sense of purpose, and that stayed with me. I'm still, you know, that even though I remember people in grade 8 in high school, some teachers saying, oh, you know, you're just young, you'll lose that passion, you'll lose that that vision, and they're wrong. I'm also stubborn. If people tell me I can't do something, that's part of my leadership style. I've kept that sense of purpose. I might be a bit slower, or might be a bit more refined in some of my techniques than younger days, but I still have that sense of purpose. Equity is a really important something I live a lot by. Empathy is really important, and I think I've demonstrated that in some of the things I've talked about, that's important to me. Being determined, and you can be determined and still not, stamp on people and cut people's throats or stab them in the back, but determination is important. Believing in yourself, and again, but still humbly, but you do need to believe in yourself. And I said that's what Mr. Shepherd helped me start to understand, that belief in myself. I've got a strong sense of justice, and also respect, being respectful of people, everybody, and again, trying to look for the opportunities of what I can learn, because I also have a lot of curiosity. And again, I think leaders need to be curious. When I came here, I knew not much about veterinary sciences, a little bit about biomedicine, not a lot. But I just love learning. I just like understanding. I like being with people who have got passion and will tell me, even if I can't understand everything they say. That also helps give me the drive to work as a leader, to create those environments and opportunities for them to actually achieve what they want to achieve. So we can take the slides off now, and thank you for spending the time with me. I know it's valuable time, but I really appreciate being able to have a chat with you. Thanks. You're on mute, sorry, Susan.
Susan's on mute.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Maxine. I love that combination of the picture and the story. I missed some of your stories because I was too busy looking at the pictures. Open it up to everybody who would like to ask a question now. But I might start by just saying, you seem to have traveled to so many different places. Did you actually have an intention to have a leadership life like this, or did it just sort of happen?
I did, so I don't know where it came from. I knew at an early age that I wanted to meet and learn about as many people in the world as I can, which sounds like a strange thing for a 12-year-old to think about, but it's what I thought about. Don't know where that came from. Both my parents, left school, mum at 12, dad at 14, and, so they had, none of us had ever traveled. I was the first person in our family to fly on a plane. So I don't know where it came from. Maybe it was, the high school dance PE classes where you learned folk dances from many different countries just piqued my interest. I don't know, but it was something I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to, particularly in learning medicine, which was my first degree, I wanted to unlearn a lot of things that I'd learnt in medicine, because I didn't know that it was appropriate for many places. I was interested, without necessarily knowing, it was called public health and population health. I was interested in trying to look at those things that cause those problems and try to prevent them. So I knew that that wasn't what I had learnt a lot of. So part of the journey I've taken, once I did do my master's and then start travelling more, was to actually try to learn different ways of doing things and made deliberate decisions to put myself into different settings to try to learn those things and learn how to adapt, etc. So yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Maru, have you got a question too? I can see you're also on mute, so just take a moment to adjust your screen. Thank you.
Hola.
Hola, Maxine. Thank you so much for a very nice presentation. So my question is about, and you have touched a little bit about that, but how you manage your internal stress? Because you always seem to be very busy, but at the same time you have time for others. But how do you do it in a way that you don't feel like, oh, it's good to be talking and making connections, but also you have to do stuff. So how do you have managed that in your daily life?
Yeah, good questions. I mean, a lot of my early professional life, we didn't have internet. And I think that was really important. And when I moved to Papua New Guinea, you know, we could only log on for, you know, once a day. It's different now, but I got a very good habit of trying to manage those things because, you know, it was new to me. And I think I've tried to keep that. I try not to, and I don't privilege internet over going and talking to people and having those face-to-face things. I also know that I can do internet stuff after hours. I am trying to learn. I know that that's bad role modeling sometimes. I know Karen West actually puts the bottom of her emails, just because I'm sending it at this hour doesn't mean you need to respond at this hour. And I do, you know, I try to remember to turn that option to send it tomorrow on, but it's an extra step that sometimes is too much. But, you know, I can only see people during working hours. I can only have my open door available then. And, you know, people know when they're filling my diary that people come before meetings, and I'll drop things if somebody really needs to see me because of something urgent. The second thing is that learning yourself. So, you know, I've had to learn, particularly, again, when I first went to Zambia, I was, you know, a single 26-year-old woman. I ended up finding my life partner there. That's a different story. Not wasn't on my plan, but has helped. But I had to learn about myself a lot and how to keep myself occupied, how to not expect people to work at the same pace as me. So I often have a couple of balls. I mean, having a few balls in the air is a way that I try to also not stress the people who work with me to think that they have to keep up the pace. So that's something that I do. I love reading. I love music. So understanding how to relax and how to have that me time is important. When I'm on consultancies, you know, you might be away for just 2 or 3 weeks, and you've got to have planned a whole something by the end of 3 weeks, and you're living and working with people day in, day out. I'd say to them, I have to have an hour each day just to go for a walk. And so understanding yourself is really important, and having techniques to manage yourself. And I don't think we invest enough in that in ourselves often. Some of us might, but it's really important, because otherwise you don't read those triggers. I know what the triggers are. And if I don't, my life partner will say, Maxine, you should have a bit of a break. Or the people who know me around me, you know, set those. They you know, I share with them what they have to look out for, so that they can also help me manage myself.
Thank you so much.
I can see that there's a lot of people here that are aspiring leaders in the academy. And I just wondered if you had any advice for them on taking that track.
Yeah, so
sorry, I muted you accidentally.
Okay. So don't think it's not possible. You know, so don't put barriers in your own way. But I think it is important, as that opening quote I had on the slide said, having a sense of where you're going and what you want to change, what those things are that you want to make a difference about. And keeping true to that is really important. Keeping true to yourself is important. You know, and don't let things that go a bit wrong put you off staying on some track. I mean, I've said this to some other women's groups I've talked to on campus. I was bullied. I had a boss who told me, you know, despite, you know, running about $50 million worth of aid programs and 10 to 12 publications a year, and the teaching I was doing, that I was underperforming. And he was just, you know, he was on and on and on me. I dreaded going to those meetings. I would be in tears And so I had to prepare myself for them and make sure I had lots of sleep the couple of days before and no alcohol, so that I was as fully in control of all my emotions as possible. But I didn't let that get in the way. I mean, I said I was stubborn. If I'm determined and I know where I'm trying to head, I might change some of the paths, but I don't stay off that path. I think it is important to find people who support you and believe in you and will be there for you to help you through that, whether it's life partners, whether it's good friends, whether you have formal mentoring relationships, and to remember that there's different parts to you. I talked about the mentors who help you learn about yourself and your self-confidence and how to manage yourself. There's the ones who might be mentors technically or for difficult situations, and there might be mentors that help you in different contexts. And I think it's important to have those people available to you, and they're lifelong people. And now I've got people who are having those lifelong relationships with me. And learn as you go.
That's beautiful, thank you. Ming's got a lovely follow-up question that's about the balance of things. Ming, over to you.
Yes, so I think being a leader, being visible and care about what your colleagues doing, I think that's easy. But as a manager at the same time, caring too much about what your staff doing could be walking on the fine line between micro and macro manager. Yep. So how to keep the balance, I think, is challenging. So what's your insight about this?
Okay, so again, it takes a team. And I remember the first senior staff retreat I went to here before I actually started the job. They actually let me go to one of those so I could meet the people I'd work with. And we had a woman who had been the manager of the Antarctic Research Station. I've forgotten her name at the moment. She talked about no triangles. So I keep that when I meet people. I said I meet people. I try to understand their ambitions, their background, etc. That's for me to be able to look for and create those opportunities. But they have a line manager, and I don't want to be part of a triangle. So I want to know those things because I'm privileged to go to meetings or opportunities that they mightn't have, or their line manager mightn't have because they're busy with other things. So I look at particularly opening the doors or helping support people to do those. But if there are other things bothering, they have a line manager, and I don't want to be part of those triangles. And you have to be very careful to avoid being, triangles don't work. And so it is a fine line, but it's very important to have. The other thing that's often difficult, and particularly in a smaller place like Townsville or Papua New Guinea, Port Moresby, is how do you have a social life with people, but also maybe have to be their line manager or leader, or and trying to understand how to do that is often quite hard. You could just block yourself off and be antisocial, but then that undermines that you're human or that you're part of the community or anything. So yeah, it's not easy, but again, having that reflection, thinking about that. One of the projects we had in Papua New Guinea was called the Capacity Building Support Centre. It was in the Department of Health. And one of the things I had to get people to realise is when you're trying to help support and strengthen people's capacity, which it's still not a great phrase, but it's a phrase we've got, you have to be able to unpack to them that you don't have all of the answers, that you actually also do make mistakes. And so I had to train people on how to, when they're sitting with their colleagues to try to work on a problem, to talk through what I often said. Often that's what you're doing at home in front of a mirror, or just talking to yourself, saying, no, that's not going to work, but this might, etc. You've got to do that with the people you're working with too. So it's really important for you to have that reflectiveness on your work and understand those processes you go through, so that you try to find the way to have those balances. But it isn't easy, but it's good to do. Thanks, Ming.
Thank you, Maxine.
Just following that notion of balance, the other challenge I think a lot of people in academic leadership have is trying to balance the time that they have as a manager and as a leader and as a research leader. And you seem to have managed to stay in your research active role while being quite busy as a leader as well. Was that a deliberate choice, or did it come very naturally to you? Have you got tricks on how do you balance these things so you've got extra hours in your day?
No, I mean, I am a lucky person that when I go to sleep, I go to sleep. So, I mean, all I need to do is go from sitting to a couple of degrees of lying down, and I can go to sleep. So I'm blessed, but I did learn that during uni days about how to be able to, you know, when you're trying to read those big medical textbooks, be able to get those, you know, those little, what I now have to call nanny naps almost, but those little micro sleeps, how to use those or how to meditate myself to be able to wind down very quickly. So I did teach myself that early on. I have good people with me. So I might be a research leader, but what I'm mainly doing now is trying to help people grow that themselves, open those doors. So my name might be there because that's a privilege I have, but I'm opening the doors for other people. So it's really around that mentoring. So I can only achieve what I'm achieving because I've got great teams there with me, and including, you know, mentoring, opening up those opportunities for a whole range of other people who are, you know, on different stages of their career or wanting to have that change or wanting to internationalize. That's really important to give that back. So, yeah, yes, I am research active, and part of that's just, it is, you know, I discovered it late, you know, later in not a normal academic. I had a dean once say that to me, Maxine, you're not the usual academic, Maxine. I said, yeah, good. But I do, you know, and I also think, particularly in academic life, if you know, I still do some teaching because I love that environment. I'm comfortable managing and leading and advocating for my college or the university at different fora and research. But then I also understand what my staff, when they say to me, oh, you know, this new software we have to use to record something, I actually know what they're saying. And then I can also sit at the VCAP table and also say, well, yeah, that isn't, you know, just a few people whinging or not liking change. I've used it, and that's the problem I've had too. And that's quite powerful, that you're actually also experiencing those things. I try to go to, if I can, any of the trainings or new research forms or learning techniques, so I can just understand when people talk to me. I mightn't use all of them, but at least I understand what they're talking about. I have enough knowledge to be able to then know when to do a deeper dive with the rest of the people in my team who support me. But it is really balancing time. Again, I use a diary a lot, but as I said, I will still also value, if people really do need to see me, that gets value over yet another meeting or some research time. I reschedule.
Yeah. I'm just checking. Michelle, did you have a question? I haven't quite read your chat yet.
No, I just wanted to say thank you. And Maxine, I really admire that you walk the talk, that you genuinely do as you say. And that's been a great role model to me. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Michelle. Ta.
The other question I wanted to ask before we do wrap up is, this is an advisor network. So I'm calling on you as a very experienced advisor, and I do hope you continue to play that role now that you're stepping down as Dean. Do you have advice for people about how to evolve your skills as an advisor and what it means to be an advisor, looking back now on your career of advising lots of people?
Yeah, so the first thing, I mean, I see being an advisor as an opportunity. Again, I said I was curious, an opportunity for me to learn a lot. I don't have time to read all of the literature. You know, your students sit there and they're reading all of this literature, they summarize it up for you. What a privilege to have. Secondly, they bring new ideas to you. They keep me contemporary. Keep me up to date. So I first see it as a real privilege, and a privilege to actually help guide somebody to achieve what they want to achieve. That's a fantastic privilege. Not many jobs allow you to actually follow somebody through a really crucial milestone in their life. And then often they're people that you work with or get hired by, as has happened to me later in life. I think the same skills I've talked about, I mean, understanding people's different learning and communication styles, getting to know them. One of the things often when I'm working with people from different cultures, I also try to understand, so again, and a few people on the call will understand this, you know, there's often a real hierarchy of them coming in, think it's wrong to talk to you about some of the things that might be happening in their life, or feel ashamed about telling you that they haven't achieved something, or you know, that they couldn't because of something else. But you know, sometimes understanding what those barriers are helps me understand how to work with them, and having a bit of an understanding. And if I don't know, talk to people I know who may have worked with those cultures, or see what I can find on the internet. That's such a wonderful tool. If I'd had it earlier in my career, I don't know where I might be. But the other thing is, I also say to those
she's
PhD
people's lives, and it has to be. Actually, fascinating. She works in about 20 different countries.
Mark, I'm muting you. I've muted him.
I also say to PhD students, this is a PhD culture. So this is a different, you know, we have to learn together this PhD culture. And the PhD culture, you have to talk about these things, etc. So try to set up those relationships early. Being, you know, getting the right team with you as advisors. So really being careful and thinking again sometimes out of the box. So understanding what the student wants to learn. Is it research techniques? Is it about a new country? Is it you know, something that they've got a passion about that they want to research? And getting the right people on the team to help you with that is important. Now, when I first started being a research advisor many years ago, one of the things the head of the school at that stage didn't actually encourage his staff to be on the papers that came out of his student research. And I think actually that was a really useful tool, although again, you know, my citation index, but it meant that you saw that what you were doing was trying to help the students get a good piece of research, not that what was coming out of it was for your citation or your impact factor or your publications. So you were really focused on them passing and getting a good thing. So although, you know, some of the people who worked with me at that stage, you know, from a research output point of view, have said they realised that that wasn't necessarily a great strategy. From an advisor, supporter, mentor point of view, was a fantastic strategy. And you know, seeking support from others. If you've got problems, talk to people, other people about, you know, I think the network that's been set up by GRS is really important. That Save Our Supervisors. It's really important to have those sorts of safe spaces and to learn from each other. I continue to learn something. Every time I get a new student or get onto a new panel, I learn some new technique. I learn something different. And that's, you know, that's really important. Keep being open to learning around how to be a good advisor, mentor, because advising well also makes you a good leader with your own staff, because often there's some of the same skills that you use.
Fabulous. I can feel the energy. I'm feeling like I can do it again now. Sitting with Christine Bruce, who is our Dean of Graduate Research. Christine, did you have a question or a comment that you'd like to share with us before we wrap up?
Thank you, Susan. Maxine, I would really like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing yourself so deeply in the last hour. We needed that box of tissues. And I'm afraid I might blubber as well. Maxine, I think the story of the last 30 or 40 or 50 years or whatever it was, you know, since grade 8 in high school is some that some of us around the table will resonate with. and that I hope that for those who perhaps haven't had as many years will see what it takes to have deep care and compassion for the rest of the world, to have motivation and to have self-discipline, to understand ourselves and to understand how we need to use our time to look after ourselves and to look after others. The stories you told around the trust and respect that's required, the knowledge of people that's required, the need to not only mentor, but to be mentored at all stages of our lives. And I have someone who was not a personal mentor, but who at 70 plus still found his mentors because it's so critical, are all lessons that we need to remember every day. How we actually work with others, how we respect other people's views. And I would like to thank you for your time as leader at this institution. The last 5 years, I've only been here for about 3 of them, but I know that watching you has helped me as well. And the impact that you've had on our research community has just been wonderful. The questions I'd like to ask have been asked by others. So I think this is possibly a moment for the SWAN network to recognise one of its really important swans and say that we really look forward to continuing our relationship with you here at JCU.
Thank you. Yeah, just quickly, this isn't my swan song. I'm still around. I've been fortunately offered, a full professorial adjunct appointment at JCU, and there are things I want to do for JCU because I am committed to the vision this organisation has. Warts and all, that's fine, but staying on the things important. And I think just as a leader, just to remember. Senior CEOs in big corporations have coaches, life coaches, business coaches for themselves. And seeing the rugby's here tomorrow, and I won't be here for that. I'll let my hotel room be used by some rugby supporters. To kick good goals, you still need to be coached, no matter how good you are at kicking those goals. And so realizing that you never know it all, and it is useful to get other people's opinions and appraisals, even if sometimes you don't like what they say, it's important to learn from that. You need to have those coaches to help you stay on track. So thank you. It's been a pleasure.